In this episode of the Alexiad, the future emperor's life is in danger as the empire braces for another civil war and endless palace plots. Oh, and don't forget the Normans in the west and the Turks in the east. Alexios and his older brother Isaac Komnenos were extremely close in their adolescence. Both served the emperors Nicephorus III Botaniates, Alexander as commander-in-chief and Isaac as Duke of Antioch. As they both served with distinction, Botaniates developed a deep affection for them. But on the flip side, it also inflamed jealousy, especially from two barbarians serving in the imperial court by the name of Borilos and Germanos. The more victories the Komnenoi power couple gave to the empire, the more envious the barbarians got, and they started plotting against them. Aware of the danger, Isaac and Alexios befriended the empress, and they were remarkably successful, as Isaac managed to marry a cousin of the empress, and Alexios was adopted by her. Thereupon, the envy flared up against them even more fiercely. The brothers began fearing for their lives and watched out to stay apart, that an assassination attempt wouldn't kill them both at the same time. They even scheduled who would be in the palace at any given time, and they waited and waited for an opportunity to escape their envious compatriots. This opportunity presented itself when it was rumored that the old Nicephorus III chose a relative by the name of Synadenos instead of the emperor's son Constantine from a previous marriage as heir. This obviously made the empress uneasy, and as they were now relatives, the Komnenoi tried to exploit the rift in the imperial marriage. At the same time, the town of Kyzikos just across the Hellespont was sacked by the Turks. The emperor summoned Alexios to the palace. It happened that on this particular day, Isaac was also present. The emperor required them to stay for a banquet, but all the invited people looked sullen and depressed. Alexios' alarm bells were ringing, and he feared for his life, until a servant told him about the fall of Kyzikos. The would-be killers Borilos and Germanos realized that the Komnenoi were far too popular with the servants to convince them to end their lives, so they changed their strategies. Their new plan was to summon the young men one night, without the knowledge of the emperor, and get rid of them by gouging out their eyes on a trumped-up charge. The Komnenoi got wind of the plan, and Alexios used his post as commander-in-chief of the western forces to summon many trusted soldiers to the capital. 2 days later, this small army was encamped in Tsurulos in Thrace, and Alexios met its commander Pakurianos. Pakurianos, an Armenian by birth, was told the entirety of what happened so far, and he agreed to support Alexios if they set out by the morning. Otherwise, he'd report him to Nicephorus. The rest of the male Komnenoi set out from Constantinople to join the revolt, and the women sought refuge in the Hagia Sophia, as they would be protected from the law there. Alexios, who was now the leader of the revolt even though he was younger than Isaac, asked his grandfather by marriage, John Ducas, to join him in his revolt. The envoy obviously couldn't use the word revolt, but instead he chose, "We have prepared a very fine dish, not without a savory sauce. If you'd like to share the feast, come as soon as you can to sit with us at the perfect banquet." Or at least that's what Anna said, what was written in the letter. John Ducas chose to join his relatives, and on the way to their camp he captured Byzantius, a tax collector who was on his way to Constantinople with a large quantity of gold from the Balkans. As luck would have it, he met some Turks near the river Oiros, and he used the captured gold to hire them. The army marched on the road to Constantinople, and the villagers there welcomed Alexios with open arms. As the army encamped in Scythia, Alexios received a message. Another usurper had risen up in Asia, and was with his force in the Malis, on the opposite side of Constantinople. Nikephoros Melisenios, also a relative of the Komnenoi, had styled himself emperor. He even began to strike seals and coins with his bust. As Melisenios was related to the Komnenoi, he proposed to split the empire into two administrations, Alexios governing the west, Melisenios governing the east, both as emperors. Alexios pointed out to the envoys that this proposal was impossible and made a counter-offer. Melisenios would receive the title of Caesar and be given Thessaloniki to rule. The envoys were visibly disappointed, but seeing the strength of Alexios' army reluctantly agreed, if Alexios confirmed it in a chrysobull written with purple ink. Alexios delayed this for as long as possible to gain a political advantage, as he now marched on Constantinople itself. When the army reached Constantinople, they immediately began to attack the walls, but they were repelled as they didn't bring any siege engines with them. This, and the fact that Melisenios was near the Malis, frightened the Emperor Nikephoros, and he thought about abdicating. The mere possibility of him abdicating threw his supporters into a state of confusion, and everything pointed to total collapse. As sure as Botanayates' supporters were of their imminent demise, as unsure was Alexios that he could take Constantinople by force. So he began to examine who guarded the towers. At one point the defenders were the Immortals, at another the Varangians, at another German mercenaries. That's where he decided to strike. He sent an envoy to the Germanic leader Gilpractos, who agreed to betray the city in the near future. George Palaiologos, yes, from this Palaiologos family, was sent to the walls to open the gate once the signal was given, and open the gates he did. The Komnenoi forces advanced through the Carsian gate and scattered there in all directions. They did refrain from murder, but all other crimes were committed with complete and reckless disregard for decency. Nikephoros III decided to abdicate in favor of Melisenios and sent a messenger to the ships in the harbor to transport his army to Constantinople. George Palaiologos intercepted his messenger, and the fleet returned to the harbor. He traveled to the Acropolis and proclaimed Alexios to be the new emperor. In the meantime, George's father Nikephoros Palaiologos, who was still loyal to the Botanayates, advised him to take the Varangians and crush the looting and disperse invaders. Botanayates refused, as he had given up all hopes. He sent Palaiologos as an envoy to the victorious Komnenoi. The message read, "I am a lonely old man, with neither brother, nor son, nor relative. If it is agreeable to you, you can become my adopted son. For my part, I will take away none of the privileges granted by you to each of your comrades in arms, nor will I share in any way your authority as Basileus, but will merely enjoy with you the title, the acclamation, the right to wear the purple sandals, and to live quietly in the palace. The government of the empire will rest entirely on your shoulders. Alexios agreed, but the Patriarch of Constantinople, a practitioner of asceticism and endowed with the divine gift of prophecy, advised Botaniatus to abdicate and to take up the robes of angels. He abdicated on the 4th of April 1081, Easter Sunday.